Hello, everybody, and welcome to A Mighty Blaze, the Friday Frontliner special event. I'm Nancy Johnson, one of the hosts of A Mighty Blaze, as well as the author of The Kindest Lie. And I'm here with my friend and fellow author, Jayne Allen, who is the author of the Black Girls trilogy. And just before we get started in our conversation, which we can't wait to jump into, I just wanted to take a moment to just acknowledge the time that we're in right now. We're in an international crisis with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And our thoughts here at A Mighty Blaze are certainly with the people of Ukraine, as well as the people of Russia who have been brave, the ones who have been brave in standing up against this aggression. And it is really just a difficult time for us as a world. And I do believe, though, that there's power in books to connect us across difference. And so I am excited to be here for us to talk about our books, which I think do exactly that. And so we're going to tell you guys about each other's books and about each other. And I'm going to kick it over to you, Jayne, to start.
Well, thank you so much, Nancy, and thank you to everybody that's watching. Thank you to Mighty Blaze for having both of us. And it is truly my pleasure to introduce you, Nancy. It's been such a pleasure to get to know you over a few events now, and you're just an incredible person, and I'd love to share more about your background. A native of Chicago's South Side, Nancy Johnson worked for more than a decade as an Emmy-nominated, award-winning television journalist at CBS and ABC affiliates in markets nationwide. Her debut novel, The Kindest Lie, is the Target Book Club pick for February. It has been reviewed by the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, and is featured on Entertainment Weekly's Must List. It was a New York Times Editor's Choice selection and has been named one of the most anticipated books of 2021 by Newsweek, O, the Oprah Magazine, Shondaland, NBC News, Marie Claire, Elle, the Chicago Tribune, the New York Post, Good Housekeeping, Parade, Refinery 29, and more. A graduate of Northwestern University and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, which we'll have to talk about because you know I went to Duke. Nancy lives in downtown Chicago and manages brand communications for a large healthcare nonprofit. The Kindest Lie is her first novel.
Oh, thank you so much. Yep, this is it. Kindest Lie.
This is it.
Yes, yes.
Should I read a bit about The Kindest Lie?
Do you want to do that? Sure.
I'll do that, and then you can switch over. So this is the paperback version. I actually have both the hardcover and the paperback for The Kindest
Lie. Nice.
So beautiful. I love these covers. So a promise could betray you. If you have not read The Kindest Lie, this will definitely make you pick it up, and you can get it in Target as a book club pick now. So it's 2008, and the rise of Barack Obama ushers in a new kind of hope. In Chicago, Ruth Tuttle, an Ivy League educated Black engineer, is married to a kind and successful man. He's eager to start a family, but Ruth is uncertain. She has never gotten over the baby she gave birth to and was forced to give up when she was a teenager. She knows that to move forward, she must make peace with the past. Returning home to the Indiana factory town of her youth, Ruth discovers that it is plagued by unemployment, racism, and despair. While her family is happy to see her, they remind her of the painful sacrifices they made to give her a shot at a better future. As Ruth uncovers the burning secrets they desperately want to hide, she befriends Midnight, a young white boy who is also looking for connection. When a traumatic incident strains the town's already scorching racial tensions, Ruth and Midnight find themselves on a collision course that could upend both their lives.
Oh, thank you so much for reading that. Yeah, thank you. It's always so weird, so surreal to hear somebody read your bio and to read about your book, and it just feels real, you know. It's kind of fun.
Oh, you're so accomplished, Nancy. So and the book's amazing. So it's
thank you, thank you. And so I'm really excited. I have Jayne's other book too, Black Girls Must Die Exhausted, but I'm in between places. That's at my mom's house, so I got her books everywhere. surrounded by them. Let me tell you about Jayne. Jayne Allen is the pen name of Janique Seeley, a graduate of Duke University. We will talk about that.
I know.
At Harvard Law School. And I think you're
I have,
repping that with your, let's say you're repping that
I'm
with your
repping today. Yes, absolutely. Historic
Harvard.
day.
Yes, it is. It is. Drawing from her unique experiences as an attorney and entrepreneur, she crafts transcultural stories that touch upon contemporary women's issues. She's the author of Black Girls Must Die Exhausted, her first novel, which she calls the epitaph of my 30s. And then she also has Black Girls Must Be Magic. And then there's going to be a third book in the trilogy that's coming out. A proud native of Detroit, she lives in Los Angeles. And I'm going to read you a brief description of Black Girls Must Be Magic. And this is the story of Tabitha. So and so I'm telling you is I read the first one and I've read this one, and you don't really have to have read both to understand the story and to pick it up, but it's great to read all three so that you can follow the journey of Tabitha. For Tabitha Walker, her grandmother's adage, Black girls must die exhausted, is becoming all too true. Discovering she's pregnant after she was told she may not be able to have biological children, Tabitha throws herself headfirst into the world of single mothers by choice. Between her job, doctor's appointments, and preparing for the baby, she's worn out. And that's before her boss at the local news station starts getting complaints from viewers about Tabitha's natural hair. When an unexpected turn of events draws Mark, her on and off again ex-boyfriend, back into her world with surprising demands, and the situation at work begins to threaten her livelihood and her identity, Tabitha must make some tough decisions about her and her baby's future. Bolstered by the fierce support of Miss Gretchen, her grandmother's best friend, the counsel of her closest friends, Layla and Alexis, and the calming presence of her doula, Andale, Tabitha must find a way to navigate motherhood on her own terms. Will she harness the bravery, strength, and self-love she'll need to keep the village together, find her voice at work, and settle things with Mark before the baby arrives? Da, 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 da. So you got to read it to find out what's going to happen. So yeah, I'm so excited for your books and everything that you're doing. Are you there, Jade? I think are we having a technical problem there? I think you're frozen on my end, Jayne. Oh, she's going to leave and come back. I don't know, Julie. Do you want to come and chat while we wait and see? Hey, this is Julie, our producer.
Hi, we have Jayne back.
Oh, we can chat.
We can chat, but I'm going to bring Jayne back because you guys were just getting started, and I want to hear more about what you have to say about each other's work.
Yeah, probably an internet issue. Oh, there she is.
Thank you.
Jayne.
Sorry.
You're
Hi,
back.
I don't know if it was me that froze or
You froze.
Okay, so hopefully we're all set. Sorry about that. Technical.
All right. Thanks, Julie, for coming in.
Thank
I was going to have a
you.
little convo with Julie.
Yes.
So I talked to myself.
Hopefully that will not happen again. But there are technical difficulties.
Oh, I know. I did want to say we had said earlier that you were wearing Harvard, and we were saying you were repping Harvard Law School, and I'm assuming that's because of our president, Biden, selecting
Judge
Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson as his nominee. Yes, for the Supreme Court.
Yes, a historic day. And I something that's just so important, I think, is just a reminder that I would say thank you to her for standing in the gap between what is impossible and what has not happened yet, and reminding us that there is a difference. And so I just think that's something for all of us to celebrate is that reminder. And it's just an exciting day. All of my classmates have been texting each other, and just very joyful.
Yeah, I heard Laura Coates, she's a Black attorney who is on CNN often as a legal analyst. And I heard her say this morning that she said, today, as a Black attorney, we are all being nominated to the Supreme Court.
Every single, I know. It's like all of them showed up.
Everybody. And I'm not an attorney, but I'm a Black woman, and
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I've been nominated too. And so there's just
Yeah.
this sense of pride that we feel.
A sense of pride. And I think it's that I was trying to think, what's um the general story of this? Why does this feel like such a victory? And to me, it's that reminder again that there is a difference between what is impossible and what has not and just hasn't happened yet. And we have these moments like this that I think are celebrations for all of us, Black women and women in general, and all people who have been told by for one reason or another in society that something or a dream is impossible, and then to have a reminder that there is a difference between impossible and hasn't happened yet. So it's like we all show up for that.
Yes.
So speaking of that, actually, talking about path to publication.
There you go. She's got our path to the Supreme Court. We got our path to publication. Yeah.
Exactly, which again is again that kind of a similar theme, especially that curious path of becoming published. For me, it was a non-traditional path, and I wound up putting my book out on my own after being told that my main character was not relatable, and then discovering that there was an audience and believing there was an audience and finding that audience and ultimately moving to traditional publication. And I think for every author, that experience, their own unique experience to getting published and finding their way to an audience is one of those things where it's that difference between impossible and hasn't happened. And I'd love to hear your experience and your path publication, and also how and the experience of ultimately becoming a Target Club pick, which is such a huge, wonderful development, and gives you people can find your books and access your books everywhere, even who wouldn't traditionally find themselves in a bookstore. So I think it's really important, especially to have that kind of access. So love to.
Yeah. And I can start with the end there with Target, because we both experienced that being Target book club picks, because I see your books in there too, in the same shelves that my book is as well at Target. And it was just surreal. I mean, I got an email from my editor and it said Target in all caps with a bunch of exclamation points. I was just blown away to hear that that my novel is the Target book club pick for February. So I still see it everywhere. Some stores, my picture is there too with a little blurb about the book, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just so exciting. And I had to sign all those
tip-in
sheets. That's what it's called. Yes, I remember these 7 boxes arriving at my doorstep filled with these 7,000 tip-in sheets that I had to sign. I used over 20 pens to sign them. So basically, I'm just autographing them for readers. And, it's just such a blessing to be in Target, because I think, people are buying their paper towels and they can also get a paperback along with it. So it's a dream come true. But it's like you said, that's the, where we are now, but the journey to get here, so many people look at only the end result and think that's where it started. But no, it started so long ago, all the blood, sweat, and tears of, writing the book. So it took me 6 years to write The Kindest Lie. And I workshopped it a lot, had many beta readers, and I got tons of rejections. I stopped counting how many rejections I got for this book. But there was one literary agent, Danielle Bukowski at Sterling Lord Literaristic, who rejected. And then I emailed her to say, thank you. I plan to incorporate your feedback and revise. She said, if you're going to revise, get back with me. And then fast forward almost 2 years later, after I'd done a lot more work on the book, she offered representation. And then it took me only 2.5 weeks to get the book deal. So things started to move a lot faster. And so I just think there's so many people out there who have a book, in their heart, or a book on the computer, and they don't know if they can do it. And I think you and I are here as a testament that anything is possible when you persevere. You've got to stick with it.
And I think it's great that we both have two different types of stories and two different pathways and two different ways through obstacles. And I think being able to tell that story and building out, showing, I would say showing the work of it,
Yeah.
and those decision point moments. Even in, you're giving the follow-up and saying, I'm planning on incorporating because people sometimes they just get that negative feedback and deflate a little bit, and that's yeah. So, and on the sharing on the Target story, when I got the announcement, the news from my publisher, it was like a surprise. They didn't tell me what was happening, and this was like kind of early on into our relationship, and they're like, well, can you come to a meeting? All of us are, going to be in the meeting. It was like the publisher, everybody, my editor, and I was like, oh no, did I do something wrong? I was like, am I in trouble?
Oh, that's so funny. They just want to announce it to you.
I called my agent. I was like, I think I'm in trouble. It's an all hands meeting about me. Like, it's an intervention. Like, I did something wrong. And so they were like, we just wanted to tell you. I mean, this was as much in person as we could be. But they were like, this is the news that it's a Target Club pick, and so congratulations. And it was a nice celebratory moment.
For sure. Sharon saying you're in a good kind of trouble.
Right, good kind of trouble.
Exactly. Good trouble.
I was so worried. Like I remember commenting, I think I'm in trouble.
I think I'm in trouble. Like, oh no, that is so funny. Yeah. So I know we want to also talk about, I mean, that you and I, we have different books, but there are some common themes in both of our books, quite a few actually, but I think one of the biggest ones is motherhood and just the unconventional treatment of motherhood, and really digging into the interior journey of the women, the mothers in our books. And I know for me with The Kindest Lie, I kind of wrestled too with having my main character, Ruth, having been a teenage mother, because she's also a Black woman. And I was thinking too about that representation aspect as well. But teenage mother, and then she walks away from her baby so that she can go on to Yale and then go on to become an engineer. And that's not a very popular choice for a mother to make. And women are often judged harshly for making that kind of a decision. And so I knew that was going to be difficult too, because I might get some feedback from readers that, that wasn't the right thing to do. And then she goes, not only that, I think where I got the most feedback was that she then goes back to her hometown trying to search for her son. So then she's possibly disrupting the life of the child she walked away from, so it's kind of that double injury there. And then also, then she meets Midnight, this poor young white boy, and he's also searching for this sense of family and connection. And so then Ruth is also becoming a surrogate mother in many ways, because she hasn't had the opportunity, even though she's a mother biologically, she hasn't had the opportunity to really mother until she meets Midnight, which is, 11 years later. And so that's an interesting relationship. And then I also have this mother, Verna Cunningham, who is a Black mother who has to have the talk with her Black son. And that is not the talk about sex, but the talk about how to be and comport yourself as a Black boy in America and all the dangers that go along with that. And so that's also another view of motherhood that is unique in many ways to Black mothers, that other mothers don't have to necessarily walk that same journey. I was just talking to a book club group the other night, an all-white book club group, and I was saying to them, I was like, when white mothers are having the talk, or not the talk, but if they're worried about their child, it's like, is my kid going to get in an accident, or what's going to happen? Just the natural things that parents worry about. But this is unique, I think, to
this type of mother,
this kind of mothering. And then finally, I'll just say the character of Mama, who's the grandmother, Ruth's grandmother in the book. She's somebody who really holds on tight to her grandchildren and loves hard, and can be questionable too in terms of the choices she makes as she mothers. But she's doing what she thinks is best and what's going to get them ahead in life. And so it's just for me, it's always about the complexities and the difficult choices that women have to make as mothers. So what about you? What inspired your unique take on motherhood with Tabitha?
For me, I've had a unique view of it in my life. I'm in my early mid 40s. If I'm giving my actual age, and I've never been married, and I froze my eggs in my late 30s. And that was one of those experiences. And I also dealt with fibroids. And so dealing with both of these like reproductive health issues kind of later in life, it's a experience of knowing nothing, hearing nothing, talking nothing about this. And then all of a sudden you need to know everything because all of a sudden it's time is of the essence. You need to do this right away. And and it's a war of information and time. And it really does matter how much you know. And that does affect your outcomes. So I found myself in a position that not even knowing whether or not I wanted to be a mother, but knowing that if I didn't do something, that option would not be there wouldn't be a choice at some point soon. And so I had to go about that. And I didn't have the benefit. I couldn't find really anything in fiction about that kind of struggle or journey. But in that world, it was just a very broad, deep world of stories of struggle and triumph and internal decisions and experience that's kind of in the shadows that we don't talk about that we should, there's shame there's all of this. It's just so much that should be unpacked. And so it just inspired me to add this into the realm of fiction. And there was very little in the space of nonfiction, very little, especially as it pertained to the world of being a single mother by choice or choosing to proceed without a partner. There was very little with respect to egg freezing, the IVF journey. There's so little, and I think almost nothing in fiction. And so I thought, okay, this is an important story to tell. And I think it's an important story to tell from a Black woman's perspective because so much of that journey of motherhood has a stigma attached to it societally. Single motherhood is not the same perception wise, stigma wise for Black women. Reproductive health and fertility, even the myth of sort of hyperfertility for Black women is not the same. And so I thought, wow, this story, this journey is going to be really, really interesting from the perspective of a Black woman, and just interesting generally. But her unique take on it and all the societal layers added on top of it really makes a great, juicy tale here. So, that was my thinking. I wanted to normalize these aspects, and I also wanted to destigmatize, get rid of some of these stigmas around single motherhood, get rid of some of these stigmas around fertility, and erase the shame. I just, the weight of all the other things that we're dealing with, and the weight of all those other journeys. Let's erase the shame of this, and we should be able to bring this into community and normalize these conversations and be able to talk about it. So that was something that that I wanted to see, and was hoping that could also happen, that people wouldn't feel alone and feel more seen.
Yep. That's what I felt reading your book too. Like I've connected so much with Tabitha and with her journey. And I told you before that I was 40 when I was 40 years old. I went to the gynecologist, and we had a conversation. He was really blunt with me that I had to make a decision on what I wanted to do. And and I was like, I'm not married. You know what I mean? Because I still have that in my head that I would have to be married. And he said, do you care more about your social situation or being a mother? And that was really tough. It was a harsh question, I felt at the time, to be asked. And I didn't know what to do with that. And so I didn't do anything. And not doing anything is also a choice as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important. I love the way that you've shown all of these different aspects and the sort of the other side of motherhood and all of these other journeys without really attaching judgment to them, but just showing the human journey of this and showing the fullness of humanity of motherhood. And I think that was what I wanted to do too, was show the human journey of this and remove that societal layer of judgment, which doesn't allow us to show the vulnerability and to really share and to allow others to learn or feel community.
Right. And other women see themselves in our stories, and they know it's okay to feel what they feel because they're not alone in that. Yeah. And so if you have someone reading my book or your book and they're saying, oh yeah, yes, that, because that's what I do with the books that I really connect with. And that's what I think we want.
Yeah. Have you had, this is a side question, but have you had readers say to you, you know, that this like touched upon something for them that they didn't know, or they, you know, felt seen, or there was a piece of their experience they were just glad to have represented?
Yes, definitely. And some people have told me directly. I've heard it through others too. So, like one of my best friends in Dallas actually is a professor at a community college. And she told me recently that one of her students came up to her who doesn't know me and said, oh, I want to tell you about this book I read that changed my life. And it was my book, The Kindest Lie. And I was like, oh my gosh, because it really helped heal this young woman's relationship with her mother. And they were having a lot of strife. And I don't know all the details of that, but I've had so many people say to me that, you know, it's really been meaningful in terms of their relationship with their sibling or with their mother or their spouse. You know, when we talk about the issue of race, you know, one woman in a book club said, she said, my father and I have been arguing about this race thing, and we can't have a conversation without getting into a fight about it. And she said, until, you know, I introduced your book and we talked about the characters. And that's the beauty of it. That's why I do what I do. And so when I hear those stories, everything that I've gone through to get here to publication is worth it for those moments, and to know that I had that kind of an impact through my work.
That's amazing. Those moments. There's a moment where it was I was talking to one of my neighbors, and we hadn't really spoken before, and we were both walking dogs, and she asked me, what did I do for a living? I was like, well, I'm an author. I have a book out. It goes into this conversation, but I said, you know, I brought up that it tackles infertility. Thank you, Sharon. Sharon said the book cover is gorgeous. Appreciate that. But my neighbor said that I was telling her about the infertility theme that is within this book, and reproductive health theme, and she's like, wow, she's like, I actually can relate to that. She's dealing with endometriosis. She's like, I've never actually said that to anybody. And when I talk to my friends, you know, with my friends, I don't want to say anything because I think it's going to get weird. I don't want the conversation to get weird. And then people don't know how they feel, don't know what to say. She's like, so just to be able to read something and go into a space where there's this topic and, you know, I can connect. She's like, and so anyway, we started talking about IVF and all of it, and we just became friends from that conversation. It just opened this door to this, you know, kind of vulnerable space that neither one of us would have entered into, but for this topic that we just had permission to discuss at that point. So I did feel as an author, I was like, oh, this is a reminder, like this is why we do this, that we give people entry points to vulnerable spaces that they otherwise wouldn't be able to enter into.
Be able to access, that's for sure.
Yeah. So going into the topic of race also, that's a theme in both of our books, even though the books aren't about race, but because we have characters who are Black, it's a layer that is shown. And I'll say for the way that I approached it, and I definitely am going to throw it over to you because it'd be great to hear both experiences with this. The way that I thought about writing this Black female protagonist, I did not want to write a story about race at all, but it was obviously something that can't be ignored because I have a Black female protagonist, and I also thought of it as sort of a benefit that to have this person and this person's perspective to be able to teach the lessons ultimately of the story, which I view as the path to fulfillment and finding the courage to be yourself, to express your wants and desires, and ultimately finding out what thriving looks like for you uniquely, authentically. So this journey of authenticity from a Black woman's perspective, who has all these additional layers of societal judgment. And so what that writing process and that journey forced me to do was to think about for myself, even, which I hadn't really, what is the experience internally and otherwise of being a Black woman. What does that mean in contemporary society? What does that feel like? What is it? When when am I aware of it? You know, what's there to be aware of? What lessons does it teach me? Where's the pain? Where's the joy? What are the benefits? So I wound up having to do that internal exploration, and then build that into Tabitha's journey and her character. So there were important conversations that I brought into Tabitha's experience. Her grandmother happens to be white, and the most meaningful scene for me to write was when they asked each other a question, which I feel like none of us really do, which is, what does race feel like to you? What's your experience? And it's just, that was such a vulnerable space, and that was one of the most daunting scenes for me to write. At one point, I felt like I felt like I was carrying the weight of reflecting this for all, all Black women, all white women, and I would have to remind myself, characters. So I just wondered what your experience, how did you approach writing about race? What were your thoughts about that? What preparation did you have to do personally to write it, and did you have any particular goals?
Yeah, so unlike you, when I started thinking about the kindest lie and conceiving that as a story I wanted to tell, I was definitely thinking about race, because that's something that I'm always just consumed by. I think of it as America's original sin. And so I was inspired by the election of Obama in 2008. I didn't start writing the book until Obama's second term, but I was definitely thinking about the racial divide in America. And while it was a time of great hope that was, almost palpable for so many, we were still divided. And I was seeing that play out on my social media feed. And then at the same time, people were saying we're now post-racial as a society because we've elected a Black president. And that was clearly a fallacy. That was not the case.
Hopeful thinking.
Wishful thinking, but not the case. And so I wanted to tell that story, but I didn't want to write a book, to say this is a book about racism. Racism was just kind of an entryway for me to get into it, because I think there's a danger in trying to write a piece of resistance, and to go into it thinking about it in that way. And I think about now, the timeliness of my book with the unfortunate murder of George Floyd. And a lot of folks think that I wrote the book, after that happened, that it was kind of a response to that. And it certainly wasn't, because I wrote it so long ago in the Obama era. But I think after the murder of George Floyd, so many people started doing anti-racism reading, and a lot of that was nonfiction. And sometimes, and I know a lot of people who've done that reading, and sometimes they start to feel defensive about what they read, like, that's not me. You're not talking about me. Are you trying to call me a racist? What? And, but with fiction, there's this power and this way to really get under people's skin and really connect with people in a way that they can do it. And it's not, they don't have to be defensive about it, and you can do that through story and storytelling. And so that's what I was really trying to do in terms of writing about race. So for example, Ruth, my main character, this engineer, on the one hand, also race and class, that intersection. So on the one hand, she is very successful financially, but yet when she's on the L train with her husband in Chicago, and this, white cop is hassling a Black boy who's drumming for tips, she and her husband are sitting there rigid with fear over what might happen, because they know what often does happen. And then on her job, she's getting passed over for promotions, in the engineering space. And so there are all these ways that she experiences that. And then on the other hand, I'm showing life through the perspective of this white boy who's 11, and his family is struggling. His dad's just lost his job at the plant. They're really having a hard time financially. Yet you see throughout the book, he's able to walk through the world with a degree of white privilege. And so both of these things can be true for both characters when we're talking about race and class. And then the other thing I'll say is that I think as Black authors, we often think about what is it we really want to write about our communities. I think we feel this, I don't know, you can tell me if you feel this too, but I think you've even alluded to it, this extra burden as Black authors about how we are going to represent our communities and portray our communities. And I know I worried about that, like I said, with the teen mom, and then this Ruth's brother Eli, who's lost his job. He's spending too much time at the bar. He's kind of a, portrayed a bit as a deadbeat, dad. And I didn't, and I worried about these portrayals. And so that's one thing. And then also, whether we want to talk about Black, it is exhausting. Yeah, that's why Black girls must die exhausted for sure as Black female authors. And so then there's Black joy versus Black pain, because you hear so many Black authors say, there's some who say, I'm tired of reading about slavery, or I'm tired of reading about Black folks, struggling, and that I want to write about the joys of what it means to be Black. And I get that, because we are so burdened, and there's so few representations of who we are out there. So we feel responsible for putting out the best representation of us. And so I've struggled with that. And I've tried to combine Black joy with the Black pain in my book. And I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, I think that Black joy and Black pain do go together. And I hope I'm crediting this correctly, but it's Sonia Renee Taylor, The Body's Not an Apology, she wrote. I believe she coined this. I'm not sure, but it's where I first saw it. She said that culture evolves as a survival mechanism for oppression and societal experience. And I thought, wow, Black joy, Black culture, if you look at it as a survival technology, that's the word she used, a survival technology for the oppression of the spirit. Like, it's literally the survival mechanism for the survival of the spirit for oppressed people in this. If you think about it like that, you kind of need to really truly understand it. You have to understand the degree of oppression and the degree of trauma, so that you understand and appreciate what has evolved, and the degree of joy, and the degree of celebration, the degree why the colors are brighter, why the music has a downbeat, and it's, why it has to be that way, because we're keeping souls alive, in the face of this. And so for me to fully celebrate that and appreciate that, that's why, I don't write unprocessed trauma, but you're going to get the lows and the emotional payoff. And I just feel like to have the full emotional payoff, you have to go, to a place. But as an author, me personally, I would not leave a reader there. That's not what I write and how I write. But I am going to give you the emotional journey. Like, we're going to go somewhere together. So that's how I think about it. But I think that writing about the traumas in a certain respect is a celebration in and of itself. Like, look what you made it through, all of it. And
that's the pride of Blackness too. Is
right.
Where we come and how do we get where we are?
Right. And I think that that's something that everyone, whether you're Black, whether you're not Black, whatever, that you can understand the weight of whatever the layers that if you just examine the layers of what you're dealing with and carrying, and realize that that could have taken you out at any moment, but yet you survive, yet you thrive, and to be able to just say on any given day, I did, I made it through yesterday, I'm thriving today, or I'm going to thrive today, and I'm going to celebrate myself because I'm making it, I'm doing it. You got to understand those things. So
and that's what we're feeling with, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson today too.
Exactly.
It's all part of that same continuum.
Yeah.
I do think so.
And I also wanted to add, when you were saying something you said was really important about the role of fiction in understanding race, because I think a lot of the literature that people turn to often is either nonfiction for contemporary understanding of race, or then historical fiction for this context. But there's just it's so important, I think, to have story to be able to understand the contemporary experience, because so much is nuanced. And I noticed, and it's an internal journey that you really it can't be told to you for you to internalize, because especially you can't really relate. If somebody tells you, whatever this is, it's it's very difficult to connect into somebody's, just objective recounting of something. But when you can be brought into the experience of it, it's a different type of thing. So, I could share more about that, but I will just say that post George Floyd, it was really encouraging to see the widening range of complexion of readers that I wound up talking to, and people saying, before this, I would have thought that this wasn't for me or that I couldn't connect. And now I'm realizing that I absolutely must, that this is necessary. And this is part of life that I need to learn about and experience. So it's
Yeah,
encouraging.
beautifully said. And I think that leads into, and we've really talked about it a bit, of who we're writing for, who is our audience for our books, and if we have an ideal reader in mind. And for me, it is a large audience because I've connected with so many different kinds of people, which is what I've already talked about. But in addition, I am also writing, for me as the little Black girl growing up. I am a huge Nancy Drew fan, or I was a huge Nancy Drew
Me
fan.
too.
Were you really? We never talked.
Oh, Sweet Valley High, but Nancy Drew, yeah, every book.
Yeah, I had like 60 plus of those books, and I still actually have them stored in my mother's garage. The ones with the gold, the yellow, spines. Yeah, so I've got those, and I mean, I just read every single one of them and just devoured them. And I mean, that was when I was really getting into my reading. And I didn't realize it then that I wasn't seeing myself on the page. I didn't
Yeah.
recognize that at the time because I didn't know enough to know that. And it wasn't until years later I was like, oh, I wasn't represented there. And so I think for not just girls, but for women who look like me and who have my experience, to be able to come to the Kindest Lie and anything else that I write and really see themselves represented is so valuable. I'm doing an event, a couple of events with this group. It's Chicago Tech Academy. And so it's for for girls. All of them are girls of color, not all Black, but they are, going into the STEM fields. And so I was asked to be a guest speaker for them. They have this little Black Dress event, and they're going to be doing a fireside chat with me to talk about my book. And I was just talking yesterday with the organizers of that event. And, so we were just talking about my book and the things that, we want to talk about in the fireside chat. And one of the young ladies, teenagers, was there. Her name is Malia. And she was in the background, but she wasn't on camera. And I heard her saying, is that her? Is that her? Like, oh my God, is that her? And that, I'm like, oh my God, no, it's just me, And so then I was able to chat with her a little bit, and, and she was excited. All these young girls, high school girls, are reading the book and having conversations. They want to talk about all of the issues that are, in the book, and talk about, boys and Ruth's experience with Ronald, the boy she was, in love with in high school, who didn't really love her back, but, the boy that she had a baby with. And so they're just all those kinds of things they want to talk about and get into. And in addition to just aspirations and finding your own success. And so some of that, so I'm writing for those girls. I'm writing for that girl, Malia, that I just met yesterday.
Yeah.
I want her to see herself in my novel. But then in addition, the book has just reached such a wide audience of people. There's so many people who are not Black, who are other races, white, and other, races, who read the book and also see themselves. I mean, I had a woman who said, who wrote to me on Instagram and said, my grandmother, my Belgian grandmother, is just like Mama, the Black grandmother in The Kindest Lie. And she said, they're so similar. And she said, and my grandmother, who's Belgian, also has a can of bacon grease on the back of the stove. And so I was just laughing. And that's like I thought a little more of a cultural kind of thing. And yet all kinds of people, do these things. So she was like, yeah, like I read about this woman and I felt like I was reading about my own grandmother. And that was beautiful to be able to see that, how universal a story can be. So what about you? Who do you have in mind when you think about who your reader is, who your audience is?
Well, like you, I when you said that, I hadn't actually thought about that, but I think I was writing for myself first. I just wrote a book that I wanted to read
Yeah.
as not just as a Black woman, but as a really busy professional, and that I knew I would finish. It was like the book that I kind of wanted to be able to pick up instead of watching Real Housewives or something, that it would call to me more than the remote and the couch. But other than that, it was a story that I really wanted to see. And I just thought it was important to have that representation, in part because that was an experience. I also wanted to understand more of my own experience as a Black woman. And I think books also lend themselves to the development of empathy in a way and story that is unparalleled. So I wanted to have this journey of a Black woman, that's a story that's, again, not about race, a contemporary story, a fresh story that you haven't really seen before, but adding in the layers of her experience where she is the best teacher for whatever this journey is, which is, again, this journey toward authenticity and finding one's voice and figuring and fighting for thrival, not survival.
I like that. Right.
And so that was my thought. But I really believed in my spirit, and it was important for me to have it feel authentic to a Black woman who reads it. Any Black woman who reads it says, yes, I recognize this, but have it accessible to anybody anywhere who reads it as a human story, who says, yes, I understand this. I may not have had these exact same experiences, but on a human level, totally get it. And just a quick story about this. When I first wrote the first chapter, and there's a scene with the police interaction with Tabitha, and she is going through something. That's not a real spoiler. But I sent it to a friend of mine who, she's white, she's German, French-German, lives at the French-German border, teaches English, but English, not the first language. And she's married to a woman. And she's a fellow writer, brilliant woman. And I sent it to her because I was like, well, here's my writer friend. Like, what do you think about this? Is this even good? and and she wrote me back a couple of days later and said, oh my God, is that how Black people feel in America? That was what I was like, well, I don't know, unpack what you mean. And she said, well, for me and my wife, when we go out in public, and we know if we express our relationship in any way, like physically, we feel at that point that we're in danger a bit from any direction, that we can't guarantee our own safety, and it's not fair and it's not right. But we know that that's what we're subject to in the society that we're in. And there's just this sort of sense of pervasive kind of underlying fear and dread just about living life and going about regular life. And she's like, so I can't relate to being Black. But she's like, but that was what came up for me. Is that a good reference? And I was like, actually, that's great, a great reference. And that's amazing that translated in that way, and that connected to completely distinct experiences, but connected to, people can connect people in that way. That taught me a really important lesson, that sometimes we are speaking the same language and don't realize that we are, just by virtue of what it looks like on the surface. So so
that made me think about something. Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you. That just made me think about, with one of my characters with Midnight. He's a white boy, and I've never been white or never been a boy before, but I felt like he was a character I actually connected with the most in writing. And it's because he's a kid who's stands on the outside of things, and I was bullied a lot growing up. And so everything that I felt at that age, at 11 years old, I tried to infuse into Midnight, that sense of the desperation to be accepted, and just the desire to want to belong, and all of those things. So, so I totally get what you're saying about that kind of that universal piece.
Yeah, but I think a lot of times that comes up when people are reading outside of culture, outside of experience.
Yeah.
Something will come up, but then they'll question it and think, oh, maybe I can't trust this because it seems like this experience is so different from mine. So I maybe I can't relate. And it's like, so I think just having this type of these stories and continuing to unpack it and encourage people to diversify their reading and have these conversations and start to trust what they're learning and gleaning from this, and to have that understanding So, that makes it very exciting for me to know that people are starting to realize that what there is to learn, and that the importance of diversity isn't just sort of representative diversity, but there's really a personal gleaning and learning that can come from it.
Yeah. And so we do have a few time for questions if people want to put questions in the chat. I know we have one that has come in, but are there other questions? All right. Do we want to get to the questions now? What do you think, Jayne? Or do you want to keep going?
I think, we have just a bit. Maybe we should get to the questions.
And then we can also,
we can talk forever.
We want to talk about what we're working on too, what books are coming, I know. But let's get to these questions. So this first one we have comes from Anissa. And thank you, Anissa. I saw your comment too about midnight and how much you love midnight. And we love you, Anissa. Anissa is I call her a super reader. She says, what did she say? Oh, here it is. What is the best advice that you have received from another author? I'll let you go. Take that one.
I have to think. I have one, and I'll say I did not take it well when I first got it. I got advice. I actually was I was seeking advice, which might be why I haven't sought a lot of advice since this. But there was one author who I looked up to, and I wrote him an email, and I was like, "Do you have any advice for an aspiring writer?" And he wrote and said, "A true writer would not be writing me. A true writer would be writing." I was so mad. I was so upset by that. And it took me years and years to really understand, even though it was phrased in a way that was not particularly helpful for me at the time. But I understand, and I understood that, especially in terms of turning professional and being a professional writer, it is just a discipline of writing and writing every day. And there's nobody that can do it but you. There's no one, there's no one that can help necessarily. So that was, that was like, we were looking for someone to save us. We're looking for someone to do it for us. And, there's not anyone who can, with writing and being an author, ultimately it's you. So that was probably the best piece of advice, even though it took me a long time to appreciate it.
Yeah. And then that connects to that advice about butt in chair. Keep your butt in the chair and write. And I remember crime fiction author Laura Lippman telling me in a writing workshop one time, or after workshop, she was saying that you want to pay yourself first with your writing time, just like you pay yourself first in a 401k. And I was like, oh, wow. And I'm not always doing that. And I need to do that more. She was like, that should be what comes first before everything else in your day. I will say the other piece of advice I got was from Tayari Jones, author of An American Marriage. And I studied with her at Tin House Summer Novel Workshop one year. And so in my story, I have Ruth going back home and, she's seeing her grandmother, the character of Mama, and they haven't seen each other in years. And I had all this conflict and, yanking curtains and snatching dishes. And I was trying to create all this drama. And she's like, stop all that yanking and snatching. And she said, that's not working. She said, you need to show that these two women love each other. She said, readers connect with characters they see loving and connecting with each other. And that then when there's a conflict between them, it's going to be magnified because there's a real relationship there. And that was golden for me. And I'm taking that for everything I write. So I think for any writers out there, it's really good wisdom in terms of how we sometimes as writers think we need to create conflict in a certain way, but it's not always the ways that we think. So I think we have another question. Okay, this one is for you, Jayne. When did you decide to have Tabitha's grandma, oh, this is interesting, be white? Well, is she white?
She is. So it was a journey. Yeah.
Oh, I'm thinking about Gretchen.
Oh, Miss Gretchen. Oh, yeah, Miss Gretchen is unraised.
Yeah.
That's a whole other. I forgot to. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. Oh, I was like, ooh. Okay.
Yeah, Miss Gretchen is an unraised character. I don't know if anybody's read the book, and I didn't know that, but I didn't write a race for her. But for Tabitha's grandmother, what I decided for Tabitha, when I was exploring what race was, because I had to do the internal exploration, I realized that it's an invention, societal invention, and there's black and there's white. And so to explore blackness, I also had to explore whiteness. And really to be able to do that in a space of vulnerability, I needed to have a really close character to Tabitha, where there's a relationship of pure love, where just anything can be said, discussed, explored. It can go anywhere and come back from it. And so at first I thought it was maybe a parent, not a parent, but a space parent. And then I realized that's a little bit too complex of a relationship, and that's not the purity of pure love without conflict that I needed. I realized it's her grandmother, like it's a grandparent. That's in a functional relationship, that's that pure love, deep love, kind of like deep love relationship where this could take place. So I just felt that was the important space to do it. And then through Granny Tab, I was able to show the effects of race on her as a white woman who has family that she chose to give up a lot of her privilege, even though she came from poorer family. She was still giving up her racial privileges because she fell in love with a black man who was Tabitha's grandfather. And so it had effects on her. So to be able to show those effects just through these people and their stories, that was why I made that decision, that it was to be able to show kind of all aspects of this, to try to gain an understanding.
It's so funny how I've internalized Miss Gretchen now as it's like a grandmother figure now.
She's grandmother's bestie.
She's grandma's bestie. Yes. And I knew that was the whole thing of you let people decide the race for themselves, which is interesting. Yeah. Any other questions that people have? Okay. Laura. Hey, Laura. She says, do you two like writing nonfiction or byline articles? You were brilliant in fiction, but what about other forms of writing? I can take that one. So yes, I do. I love writing. Oh, she loves us. Thank you. We love you back, Laura. I love writing nonfiction as well. And so I've written not quite a few, but I've written several essays. An essay about, which I mentioned earlier, my bullying experience, being bullied as a kid and losing my voice in a figurative sense because of it, and then finding it again. And I feel like now really finding it again as an author. But I wrote in 2015 about that experience and my own arc for the Oprah magazine, November 2015 issue is where that is. And then once I was under contract for The Kindest Lie, we were thinking about, this is something that happens in the publishing world. We think about, are there companion pieces, essays that you can write that connect with the themes of the book? And so I wrote this essay that I really am excited about for the last February issue of Real Simple magazine. And it's about cross-racial friendship. And since in my book, I have this cross-racial friendship between Ruth and Midnight, I also, my literary BFF is a white woman author, Julie Carrick Dalton, author of Waiting for the Night Song. And so I wrote in Real Simple about our cross-racial friendship and just the challenges of that, and moments that I think in writing it, she didn't even know I was upset about things that happened. And so we had some really great conversations during the course of me writing that essay. But I love to be able to connect the fiction with the nonfiction and have my own take on it. Whereas I try not to be didactic or really telling too much about myself in my fiction, obviously, even though it's always an outgrowth of who you are. I think in the nonfiction is where I really get to say, here's what I think. And Laura said, that's very interesting to hear, Nancy. Love the article in Real Simple. Is it hard to write those nonfiction pieces? That's part 2 of the question. I think I love doing it, but it is difficult. I worried about my friend, mainly about Julie, and when I'm writing this, I worried about what is she going to think about what I have to say. But she told me, I talked to her about it, but I didn't let her read it. And she said, I don't want to read it because it's your piece. And I didn't want her to influence it at all. But I think it is difficult because you're mining your own experiences and you feel more exposed. Whereas with fiction, I can kind of relay some of my experiences, but hide behind characters. So I'm hiding behind Midnight in a way by talking about being bullied as a kid. But then when I write for O Magazine about being bullied, that's me, and I'm telling you a piece of my truth, and I don't know how you're going to feel about that because it's really me that's out there in front of you. I don't know. What do you think, Jayne?
I've been working on an essay for probably a year and a half.
Oh, okay.
I've probably started 3 or 4 essays. So I haven't done any bylines or essays or placed anything other than fiction. And I find that it's so much easier to write fiction because I know what story I'm telling. It's contained and it's clear. It's got its, container. But when I'm writing an essay, I just have so much more I want to say. And so that's what's taken me so long. It's just so much harder for me to go into that space. I was writing an essay about my experience to publishing and some of the issues around bias. And I just had so much that I wanted to say about that. And when you're showing something in a story, you can have the emotional impact and the story impact. It's so much easier for me than to have to explain it in this other kind of way, even though I can show it through stories I incorporate. So I'm working on something that I hope to place soon and finish soon, actually. But thank you for that question, actually, because that's going to be my little kick in the rear to go back to it and push myself.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the advice I've gotten from editors I've worked with, from consumer magazines was just, it's still you're still going to have that container, but it's a smaller container, really, and really picking one kind of a more narrow experience, narrow it down a bit. And, but it's a challenge because you're still having to show that arc. They still want to see that transformation of here's where you started. And then here's that you hopefully end up someplace different, and you're also revealing these universal truths at the same time without saying, here's a universal truth, folks. You know what I mean? So it's a challenge, but I really like that form. So I love these questions. These are great. Oh, when will our next books be out? That's what we were going to end on, I think, right?
Yeah, right. But I can take that.
Yeah, you've got something coming, right?
I've got the 3rd book in the Black Girls trilogy, the finale, is expected February 2023. So like early mid February 2023. And then I have another book that is, we don't have a date on that yet, but there'll be a 4th standalone book in a different universe that does involve surfing, Black girl surfing, I said. So, so that's what I'm working on right now. I'm
glad you said February 2023 because I told Julie, our producer, that I was like, her next book is February. I think it's coming out like before the end of the month, which is like
no.
Okay.
Next year.
I was wrong. So we have some time to wait and get really excited for it, and I can't wait for it. So for me, in addition to promoting the KINDEST Lie, the paperback release this month, I'm also working on book 2, which is due to my editor in May, first week in May. So I'm on a tight deadline to get that done. And that is called People of Means. That's the working title. And so it is historical dual timeline. And it's a story about an upper middle class Black mother and daughter, both of them coming of age at different moments of racial reckoning in America. So the mother coming of age in 1960 in Nashville, Tennessee, during the time of the sit-ins there. She's a college student at Fisk University. And then her daughter coming of age in 1992 in Chicago, but heavily influenced by the events in LA with the acquittal of the 4 white police officers for the beating of Rodney King. So I'm dealing with resistance, purpose, love, but also I think fans of the KINDEST Lie will also, really like this book because I'm also addressing race, class, and family again. So this has been wonderful. So excited to be with you today, Jayne. This was fun.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you. This has been amazing. Great conversation with you always. I love talking to you.
I know. We need to just take this on the road and do this everywhere, right?
I know. That'd be fun. We should.
We should, right? Like, we'll make it happen. But thanks to everybody who tuned in. I know, road trip. I love that. Thanks to everybody who tuned in. Thanks to our Mighty Blaze family for organizing this special event conversation between the two of us. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next time.